sailor, what shall we do with the drunken sailor early in the morning?
You may be wondering what I'm doing here. I added these trim strips around all the edges of the outside ballast keels, and the reason for that is what you saw me doing now with a 40 grit sanding pad. I'm rounding over the edges. I originally cut them with a bevel so there's less wood to remove, and now I'm putting a nice smooth rounded edge all the way around, and this cuts down on turbulence, increases laminar flow, but also when I go to coat it with fiberglass cloth, the cloth can easily make these bends instead of having a sharp bend, and we get all kinds of air bubbles and it doesn't lay down flat. So this makes fiberglassing easier, but it'll also help the boat slip through the water a little bit easier as well. Just to show a little bit of a close-up here, you can see the rounded edge here, and it's rounded all the way around. And this is just in the rough right now. I have to go back with some Bondo or some other filler, and I have to fill in the screw holes, and there's a few little crevices here and there I want to fill. And then I'll sand it again, but with a palm sander, a random orbital palm sander, with maybe 80 grit instead of this aggressive 40 grit, and that'll fine tune it to the point where I'll be ready to lay on the epoxy resin and fiberglass cloth. I'm only mixing very small batches of this Bondo, and the reason is because in this direct sunlight in a warm day, this stuff really sets up fast. And I used less hardener than it calls for the amount. Even so, it's still going to set up pretty quickly, and you have to make sure it's pretty well mixed. Going to go ahead and start filling these screw holes. Actually, just the screws are deeper into the wood. They're not at the surface. They're somewhat countersunk. So I just want to fill those in. That'll keep from developing air bubbles when I put the fiberglass on it. Have a nice smooth surface. And there's a couple of places where there's some small knots and indentations in the wood. I can't believe it. It's already set up on me. It's junk now. I have to mix another batch, use even less hardener. I can't believe it set up this quickly. I didn't even get very far. Oh well. Trying a new batch with even less hardener. And geez, this doesn't last very long. It'll work quickly, and you might be wondering, why am I just not using epoxy resin with some micro balloons to use to help as a sanding agent? And the reason for that is that this stuff here is a whole lot cheaper, and so I don't want to delve into my epoxy supply just yet. So for just filling things, I'm going to use this less expensive material. Okay, let's see how far I can get now. Hope I get further along. You just have to work quickly. I'm not going to try to be as neat. I'm just going to get this stuff on there, and I can just sand off the excess. Comes off pretty easy once it sets up. It doesn't take long for that to set up. I got fed up with using the Bondo. Even with just a small amount of hardener, it's just setting up too fast. And in such small batches, I'd have to keep stopping and mixing up another one, mixing up another one. So I got to the point where I realized that I should use the epoxy because I was only being penny wise and a pound foolish. it saved me a whole lot of time because I could mix up a whole lot more epoxy resin with some phenolic micro balloons, and since I'm using a slow hardener, I had a whole lot of working time. It was no problem at all, so I could just mix up one batch, and I just went over the whole thing, and I went over even more than I originally intended. I had so much of this material, I figured I might as well fill every single little crevice. So I'm going to let it set up. I'm going to go to lunch, and when I come back, I'm going to set this aside and I'm going to pull out the other keel and do the same thing that you just saw me do on this one. So I won't bother to film it. It's just a repeat procedure. And then later on, when everything sets up, and it's going to take longer for this epoxy to set up before I can sand, but that's okay. I'll come back, and instead of hitting it with just a small orbital palm sander, I'm going to use the same orbital sander I used before with the 40 grit disc, and that'll help take down that epoxy very quickly, and then I'll finish it up with the palm sander. So that's where I'm at. Yep, this just saved me a whole lot of time. So even though it cost me a little money to do it, I think it was worth it. It's Monday, July 26th, and for the past few days I haven't done anything. We've had nothing but rain. Just more rain. It's almost every day. And this morning we woke up to solid fog, and it was misting out, it was wet, and it's now a little after 1:30 p.m. in the afternoon, and I'm just getting started, and I only have a short weather window because later on this afternoon we're going to start seeing some more rain. Just a lot of overcast, rainy weather, a lot of thunderstorms coming through. It reminds me of the Pacific Northwest, the way it used to be before the drought set in out there, where everything's always overcast and rainy and hardly any sunny days, and that's what it's like now here in Maine. And that's unusual this time of year. I mean, we get plenty of rain, but not like this. Have no explanation for it, but I just have to deal with it. So this has been sitting underneath the rain shelter beside the boat for the past few days, so at least the epoxy is all cured, and so I'm going to try to get the sanding done, but I probably won't be able to apply any fiberglass and epoxy to the outside skin today. And I still have to do the filling of the other keel. I got that sanded down and rounded over, all the edges rounded, but I still have to do some filling. So I'm way behind in terms of progress where I would like to be, but it's just the name of the game. There's nothing I can do to control the weather, so I just have to take each day as it comes. Well, I came back from a late lunch, and while I was at lunch I checked the weather forecast once again because it will tend to change during the day, and it looks like I might have a little bit of reprieve here with the weather, and it may not rain until much later tonight, or maybe not at all. It's a possibility. So I'm going to take a chance, and I'm mixing up some epoxy. It's unthickened, it's just thinned out, regular epoxy using a thinner resin, and I'm going to apply it. I'm going to put a coat in on one side here and on the edges and let it soak in, and after that's set up I'll do the other side, and then of course I'll come back with fiberglass cloth and I'll mix up more epoxy and apply the fiberglass cloth. But at least I'll get a coat in. This will soak into the wood. I'm just going to make sure I have it mixed really well. And we'll see how it goes. I'm not sure just how far this will take me, but might have to mix up a little bit more. By dumping the epoxy out onto that flat surface and let it spread out, that actually gives me more working time, because when the epoxy is all concentrated in a small area, it gives off a lot of heat, and that accelerates the cure time. It makes it shorter, that is. But you never want to mix more epoxy than you know that you're going to use, because this stuff is very, very expensive, and you don't want to waste it, because once it's mixed, you have to use it up. So just mix a little at a time. One small batch at a time. And it doesn't matter if you have to stop and make another batch. At least you're not going to waste it. Or if you do have a little left over, it's going to be really not a whole lot. You're not going to have that much waste. If you've been following along in my boat building series of my 18-foot pocket cruiser sailboat build, you will have seen me lay out fiberglass before. And all I did is I took some fiberglass scraps that were left over from the hull when I was covering that, and I just cut it and trimmed it so that it'll fit this side of the keel. And when this is finished, I'll flip it over and I'll cover the other side, and then I'll stand it on end, and I'll use a heavier gauge fiberglass tape, 2 or 3 layers all along the outer edges. So right now I have this reasonably covered and fit, you know, and so I'm just going to take this up and I'll have it all ready to lay out, because I'm going to apply some epoxy resin to the surface first, and after I'm finished with that, I'll go ahead and lay out the cloth. And I'm missing a couple of tools that I like to use. My metal rollers, the sort of corrugated, grooved little rollers to help get out air bubbles, but this is pretty much a flat surface, and I don't really anticipate any major problems, so I think I can get by with just a roller and a brush. And that should work out pretty well. So now I can mix up some epoxy and start getting to work. This is working out pretty sweet. Everything laid down flat. I got all the wrinkles out. All the air bubbles are gone. Of course, some might appear a little bit later, so I have to just keep checking it while it's setting up, because I can still get them out if any do decide to come to the surface. I don't think I'll have any though, or not many, because the whole idea of applying resin beforehand and letting it soak into the wood is to prevent that from happening, and also to get a better bond when you do go to put the fiberglass in place. And I'm going to let this set up, and I'll come back while it's still tacky before it fully cures, and I'll give it another coat of epoxy, maybe 2 coats. This is working out very nice. Looking good. Yeah, there was a couple of places. It's alright, I was able to roll it right out, no problem. Just a small wrinkle here and there I just noticed. But for the most part I got them all. I'll just keep working it. And the only reason I'm doing this is this will protect the plywood sheathing, which in turn is, you know, together with the fiberglass, protects the concrete from, you know, if I hit anything, I don't want it to get all crumbled up and break up on me. And it makes it a lot easier when you're putting bottom paint on, smooth the surface in the concrete. We're looking good.
What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor? What shall we do with the drunken sailor?